What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another Three Geeks conversation. Today we are joined by Roger Christian. Roger, how are you doing today?
I'm okay. I'm okay. Busy as always, but doing well.
Yeah, you've had quite the career. But where are you from originally?
From London, England.
Nice. What was it that made you want to? Was like filmmaking and art design? Was that something you wanted to do at a young age, or is that something you kind of stumbled on?
I stumbled on it. I knew nothing. I grew up in Reading with a father who was a manager of an insurance company, knew nothing about films apart from I would drag my mother to Saturday morning cinema when I was about 10 or 11. And really, it kind of came as a stumble. I got into, at that time when I was at school, most teachers hated children. They were there to practice cruelty. And the only one who was a human being I identified with and who helped master. So because of that, I escaped from school, got into a tech school in Reading, which was where I was in England, and did all my exams again in a year, where I passed all of them, where I'd got 2 when I was at school with people who beat us and hit us and did terrible things to us, and art. And I got into Maidenhead Art School, which was a proper art school. And then my mate, David, for 10 shillings bought a Jag, an old, big, huge Jaguar. And we thought we were like kings. We drove to London to go to a movie with 2 girlfriends in the back. And I saw Dr. Zhivago in a huge cinema in Leicester Square. I'd never been to it. And I literally had an out-of-body experience. I'd had one when I was a child and come back in. I had another one and said, that's it. And that film has everything you could ever want in a movie. It's like a huge love story and the Russian Revolution, and it was amazing looking. And so, because my father wouldn't support me because I wasn't doing what he wanted me to do, I worked putting up marquees, which are huge tents all over the south of England. We earned loads of money as students, and it was 7 days a week from early morning till late at night. And one day we were putting up marquees, and I spied a prison camp, and I thought, what is this? Went over there and asked what they were doing, and they said, we're building it for a film. So I said, wow, it looks real. And they said, yeah, we know. There's an old homeless guy comes here every day and gives us food. He thinks we're prisoners. I said, what's this for? And he said, through the woods there, that's Pinewood Studios. So, of course, me being me, I went, couldn't get in, found a hole under a fence, pulled the fence up, got under the fence, went in, and there the stage doors were open. They were shooting a James Bond movie. And it was a pivotal moment in my life. I smelled the lights, this thing going on, and I said, this is it. I am going to be part of this. And then I went into the prop room. I stuck in there. There was no one there. And I was picking up gold bars, and I found out they were made of plaster. And that was it. So I pursued writing letters because I knew nobody. There was no connection, nothing. I wrote so many letters. One kind producer wrote back and said, you've done art now. You've got an art degree. You better do architecture, and then you can get in through the art department. That's your way in. And through blind kind of determination, I somehow got it accepted to Oxford School of Architecture. By post, I did another A-level. I needed 2 top exams. I got economics A-level, got in there for 2 years. I got to know the principal very well. He gave me my intermediate and said, you better go and do what you really love now, because you're going to be bored stiff for the next few years doing concrete mixtures and all of that. It's a long story, but this is how I got in. Yeah. And so I went back home. I was so broke, I sold this car I had, and I had to thumb a lift back, hitchhike. An architect picked me up, and he felt very sorry for him. And then he said, well, you know what? One of my team in my office worked on Cleopatra. It was such a huge film. They were hiring draftsmen from all over England. He said, call me in 3 days. That call led to a job. He arranged, and there's more to it than this, he arranged a meeting for me to go to Elstree Studios. I went there, met this man, Charlie Bishop, who looked at my folder, spoke to me and said, listen, I would take you on. He was doing a very famous TV series called Department S. And he said, but I'm just finishing. I would take you on. He said, but I've arranged an interview for you. Can you go to Shepperton tomorrow? And I said, of course, whatever. Drove down to Shepperton, and I'd either rented somebody else's car or had a little motorbike. I think I had a motorbike. And guess what? I was sitting in an office with John Box, who designed Lawrence of Arabia.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And he looked at my work and he said, I'll take you on. Are you prepared to make tea? And I said, yeah, I'll make tea, whatever you want. He said, we will have a big art department. You're going to have, so... And he closed my folder up and he said, listen, let me tell you about the film industry, okay? You're in the desert. You've got an airplane next to you and a bottle of green ink in your pocket. Cloud of dust, arrives the director, producer. This is fantastic. Can you have the airplane read by tomorrow morning? That's the art department. Because you do it, or you talk your way out of it, or you suggest an alternative. And that's held me in, it's held me in kind of, that advice has gone right through my career. And see, what I learned, John mentored me. I was making tea and like endless teas, and I'd convinced them I could draw and do other things. And John Box personally mentored me. I arrived, of course, with hair down my shoulders, Cuban boots, jeans, watching independent cinema every weekend into an office full of suits and ties and short hair. And you better shape up, boy. You want to get a career? Cut your hair, join us on Sunday. We play whist together and stuff. Stop watching all these arty movies. I would have nothing of it. And I would escape to look at the canal sets. If this film was Oliver, the musical, and the sets are just outstanding on this film. And I would sneak out and then be threatened to be fired if I ever went out again. It was that kind of weird time. But John gave me he said, why don't you do this? He gave me Fagin's box, which was going to be very much featured in Oliver because he was counting coins on it. And it was a basic pine box. I took this home, and I think this is where this whole inspiration comes. You can see Star Wars, Alien, everything. I took it home. I spent about 10 days with blowtorches, dyes, with furniture polish. I was determined this thing would look so real and old that no one would tell the difference. And I guess that's where it all started.
Yeah.
How do you go from that to getting involved with Hammer Films?
Well, that was really only that I was working in Bray Studio, which was the home of Hammer Films. So I did various different jobs, and I worked my way up very quickly. Charlie Bishop, the original art director I had the interview with, it turned out he was on Dr. Zhivago, in charge of making the entire Ice Palace, that stunning set. He took me on Randall and Hopkirk Deceased, which has now become quite a cult series. I was on the drawing board, and he could see I was bored stiff. And the set, they were really pressured, those series. I mean, really pressured to get stuff done every 10 days. So the set decorator had sadly had a mental breakdown. And I'd drawn up this crazy artist set, and I was told to come down to the floor, and I thought, oh God, I'm going to get fired. They can't shoot this set. There was everybody there, the producers, the investors, the financiers, this director, Charlie Bishop, and the director looked at me and he said, this is the best set we've ever had on this series. And I went, oh. And Charlie said, would you like to set direct from now on? Because he's not coming back. And that was it. That's how I broke. And then got with art directors. I worked with young ones, not the older ones, working my way up, and I was doing amazing films. Final Program is a very interesting movie I did with Philip Harrison, which was an early science fiction film. And so some of these were kind of part of Hammer, but it really came working my way into, and I'd always partnered for a long time with an art director called Les Dilley. And Les was a plasterer who broke his way through into being an art director and was never allowed to go beyond that because he was a plasterer. This is the British time, you know, you were Calvinistic laws, you were whatever you were, that's where you were. And I was breaking every rule in the book. But Les and one other art director, Norman Reynolds, were working in Mexico on Lucky Lady, and this film went out of control. It was one of the biggest films of its time, and I was asked to come and join John Barry, the designer. Les got me on it, and that's how it led to Star Wars, actually.
Oh, really? So that led you into Lucasfilms then? How did that go?
Then it wasn't even Lucasfilms. It was 20th Century Fox, because George only formed Lucasfilm because of the success from the first Star Wars. But it was 20th Century Fox fully.
Were you a fan of American Graffiti going into Star Wars?
Yeah, I loved it. I thought it was such a cool movie, and even more so THX 1138. You know, which George made with no money and turns the streets of LA into a science fiction fantasy. So I was kind of vaguely aware that Lucky Lady, the film we were on, was written by Gloria and Willard Huyck, who wrote, I guess, American Graffiti, I think, or one of the others for George, and they worked on Star Wars. And when all the studios had lost their audience, so they each decided to take a young director on. So Universal got Spielberg, MGM got Coppola, and Alan Ladd Jr. liked George's work and took him on. And then, of course, George worked in with his worst nightmare, like a children's fantasy science fiction film for which there was zero box office. And Fox actually analyzed, the board didn't want to do it. They analyzed that film that it would make $12 million box office. And they divided it by 3. And they told George, if you can make your film for 4, we'll give you the money. Well, it was $8 million budget in America, and there were no stages free. And so it was decided that it would be made in the UK because we were exactly half the price of America. And John Barry and I were English, so George flew down to see us. And George and John Barry and I got hired on Lucky Lady. George kind of, I have to be honest, I never ever connected to any science fiction films. The only one was Jean-Luc Godard's Alphaville. Mm-hmm. And so when George arrived, I was dressing a salt factory. Being George, he picked up a shovel and he was shoveling salt with me while he was telling me, I'm going to make the science fiction film. And I was honest. I said, well, look, I've never really connected to them, but I think, they should be like an old car in a garage. I think they should be dripping oil. I think they should be real, So it was only when I read the script later in August that I'd actually described the Millennium Falcon in absolute detail. So we got hired and went to London and discovered the budget was so small it couldn't be done. And me being me and John Barry, we decided we're going to do it. We're going to find a way around this and get it made. So Fox actually would not commit to the movie. They were trying to get the budget down to $4 million. And so George had a bit of money he was owed from American Graffiti and through Fox. So we hired a little tiny studio in London. We were 4 months, just John Barry, myself, Les Dilly, Robert Watts, George and Gary, and that was it.
That's incredible. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, well, you go back in time, there's no CGI.
Mhm.
There's incredibly primitive radio control. There was like the rule was you go into the studio, you have all this money, you do drawings, they go into the different departments that get made. Well, first of all, George had to shoot in March. So by the time Fox came in, we only had 2 months to, and this is a huge movie. And when we read the script, the biggest problem was R2-D2 because they were the main characters who told the story. Well, there was no way to make him work. And taking a bit of kind of reference from the Daleks.
Yeah, St. Vayer Dalek. Yeah.
They made it work with people inside them running around.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember, but I mean, they frightened the hell out of me when I was a
Same.
child.
Yeah,
they had a toilet plunger for the nose.
Yeah.
So we thought, you know what, we can do better than this. So we hired Kenny Baker and decided that's how we had to do it, to build it round him. I brought in Bill Harmon, who was a carpenter who did all the Monty Python movies, and they literally had no money. When you think of Holy Grail, they couldn't afford horses.
Yeah.
They had coconut shells. And Bill, there was literally no money to spend on anything. He had some wood at home in his garage, which he brought in. And he scrounged around this tiny studio and found a few other bits of wood. He said, Rog, we can build it round Kenny. I can't make a top. So I went to the back to an old lighting company and found the scrap heap. And I found that metal top from an old film light. And it fitted. So we stuck that on. And Les kind of, and I just actually sent George, because I found the first drawing I think ever done on Star Wars is on coffee-stained Monty Python notepaper, and George had done a rough drawing of R2-D2 for the size, and we had the Ralph McQuarrie paintings. He did 6 paintings, which we had, and really that's what we built him from. See, and Bill Harmon said to me, Roger, I can't make those little arms on the front. He gave me a penknife and a piece of wood and said, go and carve that at home. I did at night and stuck it on. And I thought, you know what, to make this look a bit better, because we were going to show George if we could make him walk, I went to an old trading post company and grabbed a handful of old army stuff, of which were those lights that were in the Dakota plane, you know, that your reading lights, and those stuck, they're still there. They're exactly the same. And we couldn't make him walk. We got Penny inside. And so Bill said, you know what, bring your boots in, Kenny. And he stapled his boots in the bottom of the legs. He still couldn't make it work. And by chance, of the stuff I'd grabbed, there was a fighter pilot's harness. Yeah. And Bill stapled it. And Gary and Kurtz were there. Gary Kurtz and George were talking with us. And Bill actually could wear him like a rucksack. He put the weight on him. And he literally took 3 steps in it before he fell over, crashed, and was yelling, "Get me out!" But you know what? Again, that's my moment of Star Wars, that we knew we had a movie, because they'd made, when you look at Metropolis, they'd made Maria, she could walk 3 steps, that was it. But we knew now we could do better than that, which we did. That was how it all started, really.
So with the budget constraints around R2-D2, would would you say if you had unlimited budget, would R2D2 look different? Like, would there be a different version in everyone's mind about R2D2? You know what I mean?
Not back in '75, because there was no other way to do it. There was, once we got him working and that size, it did go into the workshops, and they were able to make an aluminium ones and fiberglass ones. So maybe the only difference would have been that we would have started earlier and had draftsmen draw it up properly and had it made through the workshop. But I it's like building models to look at. You kind of get an instinctive view that, because George didn't know, he had those drawings by Ralph McQuarrie. He never said, do this, do that. He hires people to bring it to them. And that's how, John Barry said, we can't make Tatooine, George, but he designed the Little Prince in Tunisia, and he said, come with me to Tunisia. I think there's your planet. I don't have to do anything. And it was incredibly cheap at the time and near enough to the UK and it was safe at that time. So really all that we did was dress it up with, it's the other story was we've got R2D2 going. We were building land speeders with Bill. Literally had some wheelbarrow wheels at home, and he brought those in, and he had some bits of old, what were now called polystyrene, stuck those on and got some wood and was building at which John Barry, having read the script, built a 4-seater. And George saw it and said, you know what, it's too big. I mean, I think Luke should have a little sports car that's old and damaged. So he said, I'll work it out. Don't worry, to John Barry. I'll work out how to get them all fitting in, because he had R2D2, C3PO, Obi-Wan Kenobi and Luke in it. So he did. And that we kind of got made to at a point where it could go into EMI Studios with no time to make it. That one actually was farmed out to a company called Ogle, who made little tiny sports cars, because there wasn't time to do it or the manpower for us. And in fact, they used a Reliant Robin, which is famous from Mr. Bean.
Who would have thought? That's wild.
And they cut the top off.
Yeah.
And in fact, if you look inside the land speeder, it's the same steering wheel, it's the same dashboard. I stuck a few bits in there, but it's actually a Reliant Robin on 3 wheels. But this is how Star Wars was made. So my pet peeve on all science fiction films, apart from not being real, was the weapons. They were, to me, just hokey plastic things that beeped.
Yeah.
And
you had a hand in a lot of them, right? Yeah, go ahead, please. Yeah, you had a hand in a lot of the Star Wars weapons, right?
All of them.
Yeah,
every single one. Yeah. I had friends in the Armourers Baptist in England. So I went there, spoke to the owner, and he gave me a desk. He said, why don't you work here? And I loved the Sterling submachine gun. I could have used that as it was, I thought.
Yeah.
And also, if I used real ones, they were old. And also, I couldn't afford to make them or to buy them. I knew we could rent them. I'd adapt them, and then they go back afterwards. It was just a rental fee. This was the process of Star Wars. And I found a box of old sights from they were used during Ireland, during the kind of troubles there. And they were night sights. Stuck those on with super glue. Stuck some T-strip, which I'd got, around the barrel, and I thought, wow, this is pretty good, and you could fire it on single shot. And then I got inspired and thought, well, what's George keep telling me that Han Solo is a cowboy?
Yeah.
And I found the Mauser in the back there with a wooden stock, and I thought, again, this is a sci-fi weapon. So I did the same. I stuck a sight on the top, put a flash hider on the end, and I thought, you know what, I hadn't told anyone what I was doing. I just disappeared, So I called John Barry and said, "You better bring George here because this is the point where I'm going to be fired or I'm okay." And George loved them. I mean, that they had flame out the end, and the weight of them and everything. So he stayed with me, and we made Princess Leia's gun. He got fingers stuck with super glue, same as me, but we made that her pistol. That set me on the road to how Star Wars was going to be, and I then found Chewbacca's crossbow because that.
Yeah, the Lancaster. Yeah,
Ralph McQuarrie's actually is a blaster. In the paintings, and I thought, wow, this would be so much better. And again, I showed George, and he smiled and loved it. It became a kind of iconic look for him. I chose all the weapons like that. I thought the Tusken Raiders, they can't have sophisticated weapons. They're desert people, and I found that Tatokia warrior ship stick they use in Africa for slugging people. And everything. So cool. Yeah, well, what I decided was everything that I found, I would change 20%. So I found a mace that they'd made for a medieval mace, drilled a hole in the end of the gaffy stick, stuck that in the end. So I changed it enough that it wasn't original.
Sure.
That process was working. I realized we could do it for my budget. John could do it for his budget. And we could get this film made. And they finally approved the budget in December 22nd. And we went into EMI Studios on January the 6th to start the movie with only 2.5 months before shooting in Tunisia.
Oh, man. I mean, not being in an art department, that still feels tight. Like, was that stressful?
Most of these movies have at least a year now. But there you go. I mean, it kind of bleeds onto the screen, I think, the used reality of this universe. And we'd become great friends with George. Obviously, we're working together for 4 months. We watched films like Silent Running and 2001 on little projectors in the evening in the studios and stuff. And coming into the studios, we faced a typical British crew. And I kind of say this openly now. It's in the book Cinema Alchemist, and it'll be in the documentary. But the first day there, they lined up all my weapons on a table and got the ADs and the first down, and all these different people came to have a look. The first AD and the prop master there picked up the Sterling, threw it at me, and said, "This is crap. And don't you realize we're doing a science fiction film for a big American director?" And walked off to get me fired. That's literally how Star Wars made, and why to this day now, George says only 5 people actually stuck with him by his side to get this film made, because it was a battle.
I believe it. And forgive me, what was his big problem with it? It wasn't sci-fi. It wasn't big enough. It wasn't like showboaty enough. What was his problem with the weapon? Like, if you don't mind.
Arrogant kind of attitude at the time that British is best. American kind of culture was in the toilet. Science fiction was in the toilet. None of them had any idea about science fiction. They'd worked on things like Flash Gordon and thought, you have huge budgets and you build all these wonderful sets and everything. We weren't doing that. George kept saying, "I'm making a documentary. I'm not making a science fiction film." Sure. That's what Star Wars is. So, and I don't know why the director of photography, Jeffrey Unsworth, was hired he did Lucky Lady, and he's a wonderful man. He couldn't do it. He was busy. So they hired Gil Taylor, I think, on the basis of him having done, I think he did Dam Busters and films like that, and he'd done Polanski's films, but he was a miserable, opinionated, hated the job. I don't know why he took it. And there's an interview with him when he first was interviewed at lunch by George. And he said, I don't know why. I know nothing about science fiction. I don't know why I was hired. Well, that's the reason George hired him. He didn't want a science fiction movie. And he went to war against George from the first shot, and formed a kind of revolution against him. He gave him a horrible time. Special effects went with him. I mean, those people, being Britain at the time, wanted jobs. George wasn't going to give them another job. Gil Taylor was. So they sided with him. And, you know, it's common knowledge. I mean, 3/4 of the way through shooting, Alan Ladd was brought to the UK because the complaints by Gil Taylor that George didn't know what he was doing, the special effects complained, the editor said, I can't cut this together, it doesn't make a movie. He was brought to fire George off his own movie. And Alan Ladd was smart enough. See, and I think then he went on a tour around the stages. Now, when you saw the Millennium Falcon on stage, it was incredibly impressive, like a real ship. You know, and this part of this other story of what I couldn't afford to make the sets. So I suggested to George and John Barry, if I got airplane junk, which no one wanted at the time, and brought in truckloads of it, I could make the sets out of it. And they said, do it. I think I did enough to dress all of those sets for £50. No one wanted this stuff. I bought jet engines, Derwent, Rolls Royce. They were sitting rotting in
cool. Yeah.
piles of rubbish and beautiful stuff. I mean, to me, it was like, wow. So I think when he went into the Millennium Falcon hold, when he went in to see the sets, the Death Star, which, again, John Barry had built wooden frames, and then we found this very primitive press that would put out, like, it was the beginning of PVC pressed. That's how C-3PO was made. But he made like 4 foot, 5 foot by 5 foot panels. They were floppy, but you stapled them onto the wood and it became the Death Star. They didn't move on set.
Yeah.
Cheap as chips. When you saw these sets, and then the actors were okay with George, obviously. I mean, they were, and Alec Guinness was actually standing by George. Alan Ladd looked at the film that John Jimson, the editor, had cut. Gary Turtz told me this story. He said, I was outside the theatre in Pinewood. Alan Ladd came out and said, how much have we spent so far? And Gary told him, and he said, how much to finish? And he told him, he said, I'm going to walk around this stage and tell you if we're going to kill the film or not. And he came back and said, you know what, I'm going to trust George and we'll let you finish it. It's a miracle we have this film. And that's changed the world of cinema and culture and legend and myth, and changed zillions of people's lives all over the world. So that's why I'm so proud of it and stand by George and what he did and what he's given the world. That's why I'm, you know, I did the book, and this documentary will come out at some point, and I'm really, really kind of... See, unfortunately, John Barry died very young, and I'm the only one who knows how we did it. Les Dillier's gone. Les has got severe Alzheimer's, and he doesn't know anything. They were art directors who were doing what we asked to do. I'm the only one who was the creative stories. So David West Reynolds.
Read all of these out. Yeah, read all of them out there. Yeah.
Yeah. So David West Reynolds, who was the head of literature there at Star Wars, he told me I had to do it. It's a legacy. He said, this film's going to be studied into centuries in the future. You have to write this down. It's needed. So, and I know every convention and Star Wars event I go to, I lose my voice by the end of 2 days because
easy.
I get so many questions.
You mentioned you had a hand in all the weapons, and sorry to maybe derail you a little bit, but like the big one I think for most people is the lightsaber. Like Please tell me anything and everything you can about. Like, that's like one of my favorite weapons of all time. So like, if you can.
Yeah, it's the so I found things that what I would do is I got the film buy I had and I said, just bring me in broken calculators, broken cameras, whatever you can find, junk. So I had an office full of junk. I never knew what anything was for. I knew I could use it at some point. So, and I was put in charge of Tunisia with Les Dilly, and the time was coming up to go, and I hadn't found a lightsaber, and it wasn't required in Tunisia, but the binoculars were, Luke's. So I found all these camera bits, and I found a old Yumi camera, which I liked the base of, and then I stuck a stills camera that had a flip up top. I stuck that, it's all super glue.
Yeah.
And then I thought, you know what, to let the audience know what this is, I'll stick 2 lenses on the front. It'll look a bit more like what it's supposed to be. So I went to Brunnings, which is a photography shop we got all our stuff from. And in the documentary, I found David, and I've interviewed him. And he describes how I came in, and I said, David, do you have anything? I've got to make this weapon. I'm not sure what to do yet. And he pointed me to some boxes that were under, I don't think he'd looked at for years. And when I pulled it out, the first box, opened the lid, there were 3 Graflex handles in there in tissue paper. And I just went, oh my God, I found the Holy Grail. This is a lightsaber. I loved it. And you didn't know what it was. So I raced back, took 3, raced to my office. I had a bit of T-strip left over from the blasters. I super glued 7 of those around. I didn't like the clip because and the reason David French had all of them, because he rented out press cameras for period films, and the one press camera everyone used was the Graflex. So I'd broken down a Texas Instrument calculator, because if I found something, I'd open it up, see what was inside it. Maybe I could use it. And I liked the bubble strip that illuminated the numbers. That fitted perfectly in the clip. And I called George over and said, I think I found the lightsaber, George. And again, he took it. It was weighty, and he just smiled. And then the only thing after that, he said, I want to hang it on Luke's belt in the desert. So I had one assistant who was a new signing, who didn't have any materials. They wouldn't give him any, but he had a box of stuff from home. And so he had D-rings in there, and he fitted one of those on the end. And that became Luke's lightsaber. I've got them here. And I'd come up with the idea because no one knew how to do the blade. And I'd been doing art installations, and we painted front projection paint, and we used to get glows. So I'd suggested this. George said, do it. There was a big meeting. Gil Taylor said, that won't work. You'll spoil my lighting of the set. You're not doing that. George overruled him and said, Roger, try it.
Yeah.
And the special effects I made a second handle. They drilled it out, put a motor in it that had a wooden dowel in it, painted it, and so the motor would turn, and with the length of the stick, and they tiny bit offset it so that it vibrated a little bit, and there it was. That was working. And in fact, you could see that when Alec Guinness and Dave Prowse are fighting, because that's the only lightsaber fight in Star Wars. You can see it there, because we'd had meetings every morning in my office always, because there was no time to do anything. We decided the blades should never go through. They should be like samurai swords. So it gave them something to hit against. They broke a lot because they were very thin, but it kind of worked. And that became, I guess, $15 worth of scrap became the most iconic prop in the history of cinema, I'm told now.
Yeah, I believe it. I really believe that. That's awesome. And thanks for telling me that. Good. Sorry.
I think, when I look now, I'm friends with Star Wars Theory.
Oh, yeah.
and his lightsabers, he's done that beautiful now. And I was writing about this in the book because George, my book Cinema Alchemist, they decided to publish an updated version of it, and they kind of asked me and said, "Do you think, George? We know he never does anything. He won't give you one. We know that. Would Ridley do something?" Or and I knew that Guillermo del Toro would, but he was shooting, and I thought, you know what? I'm still friends with George, and I've never really asked him for anything. So I sent a message, and it came straight back, of course. And I'm going to write a foreword for you and a blurb for the cover. So the book is now endorsed by George. And I read his foreword, and it's very personal. It's very nice. But he says, I still remember the day Roger showed me an old piece of a battery, and presented me with a lightsaber. And he said, this was genius, and it cost no money. And just that was probably one of 15 things he did that day like that. So I think that's true. Anyway, I'm the things that are missing, and now I put it in my forward, ours never worked. I mean, nothing happened. Now everyone on the planet, kids, adults, everybody has lightsabers now that light up and have sounds and everything. They're amazing. So I am with Nia, with Star Wars Theory and Star Wars Theory Sabers. I'm coming out with an original, not my original one now, that'll work and have all of the bells and whistles on it. Because I think everyone wants one and everyone deserves one. So
that is awesome. What was the chatter like when Star Wars first came out and you guys saw how popular it actually was?
Well, suddenly everybody who'd been so dismissive of it suddenly was, oh, look, we're part of this. Look, oh, wow, fantastic. Look what we did, I mean, everything was dumped. That's why there's no photographs of the original. Nothing was kept. And to tell you, it puts it in perspective. Les and I were making Alien, and Star Wars went up for the Academy Awards. And they said, come on, you've got to come. We didn't think anyone would win because science fiction never won anything. We went for the weekend. It, I think, got, 7 or 8 Oscars in different departments. So we flew back. There was not a word in the newspapers, nowhere. They held a party for us in 20th Century Fox, whereby there were 3 of the little people, about 3 secretaries from Fox, the head of Fox in London, and us. And that was it. We had a glass of wine and some biscuits, and that was it. That was a celebration.
Oh, man.
See, times have changed, thank goodness. And also then, part of the culture that if you look at actors who got Academy Awards at that time, when they were asked where was it, they all said, oh, it's holding the toilet door open. That was the only thing in Britain you could say. Otherwise, you were deemed to be, oh, he's so full of himself, all of this stuff. Yeah. So we all demeaned it. All of that's changed, thank goodness now, and it's become more of an award now for your work and all of this stuff. So it was just a sign of the times that we went through. Mm-hmm. But in a way, if it hadn't have been that time, if there hadn't have been that lack of support, it wouldn't have been made.
Fair, yeah. Fair.
Star Wars wouldn't be with us if that hadn't been at a different time, because now it wouldn't have been made. If George had gone in with that now, it would, no, we need a committee to change the script and do this, and you can't have unknowns in the lead, and it would never have got made.
And I feel like I interrupted you when you talk about your documentary. You want to tell us any more about that? I didn't mean to cut you off earlier.
No, that's okay. I decided in the end, it was just when COVID was locking us all down, and that I got a bit of private funding, and Guillermo del Toro is throughout the documentary giving his version on things about Star Wars. I have Gareth Edwards, who made Rogue One and the creator. He really sets the chapters for me and how things were doing. And I from the Star Wars events and everything, everyone said, you've got to tell these stories in your own voice. You've got to do it. So I went and I couldn't fly. We were landlocked in Canada. So I found an interactive studio, one of the early ones that made children's films. So Paul Bateman, who is a science fiction artist who really championed Ralph McQuarrie in the early days and got to know Ralph, he painted me in game engineering on about 40 layers. Like I'm standing with Bill in the desert underneath the Millennium Falcon. We're walking around in it. We built the cantina that actually Ralph McQuarrie designed that didn't work for the script. So John Barry redesigned it. So we have the original one I'm walking around in and the new one. We have all sorts of amazing sets. And then I couldn't get any clips of the film. Fox wanted more than my budget for them. So I designed animated sections, and we have about 8 animations. I animated the wooden R2-D2, and I animated like building an old spaceship in a garage. I had the sandcrawler moving around, and I had it, which is never seen in the film. I with the lineup of the robots is the first thing we ever shot, and I cobbled together airplane junk and stuff and made the robots. One of them looked like a Chris Foss painting, exactly the shapes and everything. So I painted it as if Chris Foss had done it. And that's there, it's right in the lineup. And I thought, you know what, I'll show. So we had the sandcrawler stop with a big sucking tube, and it sucks it up out of the desert. I did stuff like that, fun stuff. I did, because I explain a lot how we made anything, the background of Star Wars, how Kurosawa's Forbidden Fortress was so important in the structure. So I had a beautiful, actually, an animated samurai fight, and Robin Hood, because John Barry, the designer, came up with the idea of Luke and Leia swinging across that cavern. He said, you're keep talking about 30s and 40s cinema, and Douglas Fairbanks, they always swung from chandeliers. So yeah. John came up with that idea, and we did it. So I did a section of a Robin Hood film, and I put and a section of the Dam Busters, because the bouncing bomb idea in Dam Busters, where crazy Englishmen, like they had said, if we could break the Ruhr Dam, we can win the war. Well, they said, well, you can't do it. There's no way to do it. And he said, well, I could get aircraft flying very low and bounce a bomb. They all said he was mad. It's like everybody telling George he was mad. It's the same kind of hero's journey. And Churchill said, go and do it. And they did. And they bounced a bomb and broke the dam and won the war. So I did a nice animated sequence. I got all stuff like that, a lot of discussions and different. All the stories are in there from the book. It's called Galaxy Built on Hope. It'll come out at some point. It's stuck at the moment, but I'll get it out. It's 2 hours, 20 minutes as a fan special. And then I divided it into 6. So somehow that's got to be sold and get into a home and get out, which will come. It's timeless. It's how we did it, basically. I found an interview of John Barry in some very old footage, all sorts of stuff like that.
If you don't mind me asking, what is it stuck on? Is it just trying to find publishing, or where is it stuck?
It's stuck in America at the moment on how to sell it. But, I can't say too much, but
sure. I don't get in trouble.
But it's finished and it will get out. I'll get it out. Again, it's a legacy. It's a timeless document of how we did everything, and it goes way beyond what I had in the in the book.
Yeah, I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but I do want to ask about Alien and how you got connected with Ridley Scott.
Well, Alien, I knew Ridley and Tony. I used to art direct commercials for them, they'd wanted me to join their commercials company early on and all sorts of stuff. So when I finished Star Wars, I went on the final remake of Beau Geste, which was Marty Feldman film, then on to Life of Brian, and Alien started. And I was 5 weeks from, I co-designed Life of Brian with Terry Gilliam. And the financier read the script and said, this is blasphemy, I can't do this. So he cancelled it on the spot. And I was literally in the offices in London that day. And they were saying, we're going to get the money, that we're determined to make this film. And the phone had rang and they said, Ridley was on the phone for you. And he said, is this true? And I said, yeah. And he said, get your backside down to Shepperton right now. So I drove down and I knew Ridley. I mean, already the duelist is fantastic. I knew what he was going to do with this. And I walked into an office with 6 original Giger paintings around the walls and thought, oh my God. And then I was looking at his storyboards. I read the script in 90 minutes. It just read like an express train. I said, no, I'm in. So they put me to work. And Michael Seymour had designed it. He had done all of Ridley's commercials, but he wasn't a science fiction aficionado, let's say. He'd hired a set decorator who was a friend of mine who got Oscars for Howard's End. He was better at dipping curtains in tea. And I walked across the stage to meet Michael, and Ian Whitaker, his name was, ran up to me and said, thank God you're here. What am I supposed to do with all this scrap and junk? I don't know. And it turned out Michael Seymour had hired a young kid who'd convinced him he could do what I did. He'd never even worked on a film before. And he had a little pile of junk. And then I realized why Ridley asked me to come down there. So I got the buyer to talk to my buyer. They went out and bought like truckloads of junk and jet engines. And what happened, Ridley was fighting to keep Sigourney Weaver as his main lead. And of course, the Fox Studios wanted a star. So Ridley said, because obviously the Millennium Falcon is the inspiration for, and Ridley had just said to me, I need a space truck. Can you make a space truck that's old, like an army truck? And so he said, instead of doing it the normal actor kind of audition where it's against a white wall with a potted plant, they normally do, he said, let's build a piece of set and I'll put her in action. So I built a piece of the set using all my junk as I thought it should be. And don't forget, I had Ron Cobb, who within 2 minutes, him and I were best friends. And Ron, I would go to him and say, I need this. And he'd do a drawing, and it had engines that worked. I mean, everything detailed. It was just brilliant. And by then I knew the special effects boys, and they trusted me because now I was an Academy Award winner for a big film.
Yeah.
And to tell you that, before this had happened, like I was auditioned to set decorator a Monty Python film with some standard art director who turned me down, said, no, you won't be able to do it. Times changed. And so I went to the effects boys and we put 2 of his boys on only making panels with switches, because I said, I want everything encrusted. And in fact, Ridley showed the crew, same stories actually. George showed the crew, trying to get them to understand what on earth we were doing. Once Upon a Time in the West, which is Sergio Leone's great Western, and I love Sergio Leone. I mean, to me, they're more real than John Ford Westerns. He showed them 2001, which was the Death Star kind of, and Fellini's Satyricon, for some reason, which I understood. It was aged sets that were out of proportion and everything. Ridley showed the crew Dr. Strangelove. And he came out and said, you see what I mean, that bomber, I want it all like hair. Well, Michael Seymour rushed up to me and said, "What does he mean, Roger? Hair? Are we doing hair inside the spaceship?" And I said, "No, he means the switch is covered in everything. Has to be, nothing is ever like a plain surface." So that set is on YouTube. You can see it. The only difference was there were portholes originally, and that really didn't give you that claustrophobic nightmare that it needed, that film. So they were taken out. But that was basically it. Then I got my prop boys over from Star Wars, 3 of them, who I trained how to break down engines, how to encrust in layers that looked engineered, and went to work. Without that much time, that it was an R-rated sci-fi movie, so there was very little faith. Fox cut the budget, 600,000 out of the budget a few months before shooting. Well, there is no money on that film apart from the art department. That's where it came out of. Same story, really. You know, lack of faith in a director who'd only made a beautiful period film and who was the king of commercials throughout the globally. You know, they cut. They wouldn't let Ridley build the pilot, that huge set, and Ridley kept saying, "We need scale. The audience needs to understand the scale. That's the history behind all of this." So we found a way, Michael Seymour and Nick Older, the special effects, to build that pilot was built on a turntable and only half the set. So he could shoot one side, turn it round on the turntable and shoot all the reverses and stuff. That worked. They cut that beautiful opening scene when it wakes up with the pods open like a flower. That was gone. We had a Spanish art director and we knew a set would work. And secretly, without Fox knowing, we built that set. Nick Older had some of those canopies from aircraft junk.
Sure.
And he had some pistons left over. So we made it work. It was similar story, you know, of like, behind the scenes, this is such, you know, there's a reason they become iconic in both areas of science fiction and changed it, because they were revolutionary, because they looked old and used and didn't look like science fiction that had never worked before. There was no faith that this was going to work. Again, as I said, I think without those restraints and lack of budget and lack of kind of support, but with 2 directors who just got their head down and were going to make films the way they knew they should be made, it got through. And with a support by, you know, a group of us really around the directors, we got it made.
I think there's a testament to the fact that you weren't a huge fan of sci-fi too. I think that added to the design and stuff of the show, because you were able to bring the not being a fan of what had come before and doing something a little different and new.
Yeah, you know, I did love Dune, and that's, you know, it's real, and the way that is, it's real. I love that, and I love some of Arthur C. Clarke. You know, one of my favorite writers now, it's William Gibson, who, you know, Necropolis and Necromancer, those things they're right in my wheelhouse, you know. So I think that's true. Interesting, when later on, David West Reynolds told me, I'd never seen it. He said, "Do you know the one poster that George has got on the ranch? It's Alphaville," which was my connection to that kind of world. And George had seen it, I think, at UCLA when he was studying there, and seen it. And, you know, that was the first graphic novel, I say, ever filmed, the way he did it. And I think helped him to realize how to make THX. It was an amazing time, I have to say. And even, you know, Life of Brian, it was the same thing. There was no money then to make it. With George Harrison put the money, he mortgaged his house and put up enough money to get it made. And little piece of tidbit for you, I took them to Matmata, where we did Luke's homestead, the holes in the ground, and we did the cross scene on the edge of that hole. We did it in Matmata in the same place.
That's awesome. That's cool. That's awesome.
Yeah.
As I could talk to you for another 4 hours.
Everyone
I
says the same.
Yeah.
my
Come back
last
next everyone.
question. I have to ask about it because one of our guys really likes the movie, and that is Battlefield Earth. What was your experience like working on that?
Tough as hell. I mean,
I bet.
you know, and I questioned it. The trailer for Phantom Menace, I directed second unit on Phantom Menace. So the trailer for that had come out, and by chance, I directed half the shots in the trailer. And John Travolta loved my movie Nostradamus. And he felt, so I was in LA, and then I was invited with my manager and said, John Travolta wants to have dinner with you. Well, he was the biggest star at the time, so you don't say no to that. So I went, and he said, Roger, there's this book. And I knew about the book because it's still, I think, the all-time greatest selling science fiction book of all time. And he said, I have to make this film. And he said, we've called George Lucas, and he said, you're the only person who can make this film. And I only found out later, after I'd made it, when I talked with John one night, that Quentin had hammered me to do it because he loved my film, The Sender. And he said, Roger Christian's the only person you can have to do that film. So I was kind of trapped. And there was all this advice, you can't do it. And again, the budget when I came into this huge film was $9 million. And the producer, Don Carmody, did all of, Eli Samahar did these independent movies where he took stars and said, what do you really want to do? And they made them low budget. He said, we're doing them all in Montreal. It's incredibly cheap. We can do it there. So I kind of went, and then he showed me that we could, and to do the special effects, we actually built our own ILM studios in the back of an old military base. It was literally ILM. I brought a model maker from England. We did everything with models. I got Rhythm and Hughes, they did the X-Files. They were going out of business. They were going bankrupt, and I went to them and talked to them, and I said, look, the producers have allowed me to do the effects if we can come in $1 after some budget they'd got. And Rhythm and Hughes said, we'll do it. And I said, I hate to do this to you guys. They said, Roger, we're doing this for cost. You're keeping our doors open. We've got another small film that'll make us a little bit of profit. We're happy to do it. I did it like that with everybody. And we set out to make a graphic novel. That's why we Dutched the cameras, because I wanted to do it like a Frank Miller. Everybody's kind of... What I hadn't realized was the hatred of Scientology, especially in America, and they went to war against us. I mean, in a vicious way. We stood no chance. But when it had come out, we outgrossed Gladiator on Blu-rays when it came out, and we made the film, and I had to sign with John Travolta for $44 million. At the end of the day, they got the budget to that. We signed off on all the contracts. I'm accused of making a $75 million movie, and I'm delusional because they know I spent that. We didn't. The last time that I had gone through, the film had grossed over $150 million. It's incredibly profitable. And Eli Samahar said it was the only movie, that and Whole Nine Yards, that he made out of all of them that made a lot of money. But it's never supported. No one else comes out and says that's actually not true. It wasn't a money loser. I still stand by the movie, but I just have to go quiet about it because every time I mention it, I get these people from all over, especially America, coming, it's Scientology. It's not. I'm not a Scientologist. I don't, and we tried to do interesting stuff like graphic novel, comic strip. You know, there's a few redeeming things. Tarantino came to the premiere. He sat between me and John and hugged us afterwards and said, "That's the kind of film I really would like to make, and I daren't do it." And he said, "I'm going to give you both a hug. You've got to wait 20 years. This film will finally be acclaimed for what you did." And I'd heard that Roger Ebert, long before he died, reevaluated the film and said, "Actually, this film's rather interesting." And John Travolta was on Barbara Walters. He'd never, ever been on Barbara Walters when she was at the top. And to 60 million people in the audience, she asked him, what are you most proud of your whole career? And he said, Battlefield Earth. These things are, you know, but whatever, I just got on with my life and got on with my job. There's nothing I can do. It's a shame because people did a huge amount of work on it, and creatively it's really interesting what we could do with no money again, really, because out of that, when you look at the 44, John Travolta, Forrest Whitaker, the others took huge amounts of that. I actually made that film, I think, for $9 million at the end of it, and it's massive. And you know, I always say I raped Montreal. They'd never had a film like that. They'd made art films before that. And we went in. I didn't go to studios. We found old abandoned kind of marine sheds and things and built sets in it. We did our own special effects. We did everything like that. And in fact, it created careers for a lot of people that are still doing it today. So, you know, I happen to like the film, and I wished we could have done part 2, because part 2 is, and if ever I could change history, I would have tried to persuade them to get another script written to do part 2 first, because it's just a rip-roaring sci-fi adventure of attacking space stations and stuff. It's got amazing stuff in it. And I think maybe we could have escaped some of the setup of the characters and stuff that way. So yeah,
like I said, one of our guys really likes it. I have not seen it yet, but I think I'm going to check it out now, especially after this interview conversation.
Well, I mean, you know, it's a democratic world and people have to make up their own minds about it, but I have so many people who just followed all the press and have said, we saw this movie, actually I don't know what they're talking about, it's really interesting. The LA Times, on the review when it came out, their lead writer, film critic, said, Roger Christian has buried subliminal messages in this film, and if you dare to go to the cinema, you'll come out as a Scientologist.
Oh, jeez.
And people believed it. So I took him on with humor. I said, you're actually very wrong. I did a deal with the popcorn companies. I buried subliminal messages about eating popcorn to try to show them up that it's such a stupid thing, you know, but there you go. It's a very powerful, when I said to John Travolta, you're going to have to tell me everything about Scientology. I want to go to the meetings. I want to know, because if I'm going to get attacked and everything. So I know a lot, what's behind it. And basically, Scientology is Buddhism for the West, whereby he knew that people couldn't get spiritually enlightened. So he formed methods of training that could take you to enlightenment, but through kind of mechanical training, if you like. That's basically what they do. And they get to what they call clear, which is the same as a Buddhist being enlightened, you know. Anyway, I mean, that's something that I can't kind of deal with. The you know, it's a democratic world, so if people don't like it, they don't like it. There's nothing I can do. I just get on with my work now and do what I'm doing.
Well, Roger, where can everybody find you online?
I'm on Instagram under Roger Christian and on Facebook. I have those, and I'm building it up now. So I am going to do a YouTube channel. I think the Lightsaber's coming out end of this month, beginning of the next one. So then the thing is with the book, Cinema Alchemist, I'm doing shows in America now. No one's ever heard of it. There was no publicity done about it ever. That's typical of publishers. It's not just mine. Unless you're J.K. Rowling, you don't get any press. So I realize now I got to go on the road and do it. I do podcasts. I do whatever I can because I'm very proud of Star Wars and honored to be part of it. And I think I get so many questions, and I realize it changed people's lives, and I think my opinion is it's given people something to believe in when there isn't much anymore. And so that I meet so many families, and it's given a communication between kids and parents that had never existed and still is hard to do. So I like to, you've got a dog there waiting for supper.
He must get out of the room.
Yeah, I know. I locked mine out. Mine follows me everywhere.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He was mad at me having that door shut. So I let him inside.
Well, thanks again, Roger. Everybody comment, subscribe, and I'll put all the links to Roger's stuff down below.
Yeah, and send me the links, so I'll blast them out as well and everything. Nice to meet you both. Where are you based?
We're in Ohio.
My eldest daughter was at college in Ohio.
Ohio State?
Awesome.
Yeah, in Ohio. Huge university there. Mm-hmm. She did 6 months there. She loved it.
Good.
That's awesome.
You're not far away, actually.
Time.
No, if it's the one we're thinking of, it's right down the street from us, like literally less than 10 minutes. Maybe.
Yeah, we're just across the water to you.
Yeah.
Like, all right. Very nice to meet you.
Nice meeting you, sir.
Roger. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Whether you're solving murders during breakfast, cracking cold cases on your commute, or playing amateur detective at bedtime, Amazon Music's got millions of podcast episodes waiting. Just download the Amazon Music app and start listening to your favorite true crime podcasts ad-free, included with Prime.